Welcome to Maine, we're stretched to the bone. Prices keep rising, the paycheck stays prone. Inflation keeps knocking, won't leave us alone. They're selling the lie, groceries climbing, the gas tank is low. The bill's hitting harder than snow, but silence still blankets the truth. Where does it go? They're selling the lie. Housing is gridlocked from Portland to the county. Workers commute far past what feels soundly. Talk of solution comes yearly, not loudly. They're selling the lie. They're selling the lie. Say every voice counts, but watch who gets lifted. Some stories vanish, some get the spotlight shifted. Depends on what trends and what keeps them gifted. They're selling the lie. I won't believe them, I wanna believe, but truth's always stuck in between. Static and spin, drown the signal again. Nothing is what it seems. I wanna believe you, but every headline turns daylight into redesigned skies. Facts get twisted, context missing. We choke on the simplified alibis. Wanna believe you, but all I see is shadows where the answers should shine. The fact is fiction, conviction.
Welcome to the Muddy Waters Podcast, where Mainers tell their stories.
Good morning, Maine. Welcome to the Muddy Waters Podcast, where I am your host. My name is Chuck Ellis, and the Muddy Waters Podcast exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on in our state by hearing from people around the state from so many different positions, whether business owners, moms, dads, people who run nonprofits, people who work in the political realm, whoever it may be, who have a story to tell or are doing something that the mainstream media, which has become a propaganda arm of the Democrat Party, really doesn't want you to hear. And so today we are blessed to be joined with the leader of the Maine Girl Dads and the Protect Girls Sports and Spaces ballot initiative, Leyland Streiff. Thank you so much for joining us, Leyland.
Thanks for having me, man. Awesome to be here.
Yeah. We wish we didn't have to be here, right?
It's kind of weird that we're here. Yeah.
in this place in life. I remember, yesterday I was watching or listening to all the testimony. And I remember a year and a half, like it was a little over a year ago when Representative Laurel Libby first posted that picture of the trans athlete. And how everything blew up. And I remember talking to people involved, some of the people involved in politics, who were basically like, don't even spend time on that issue. It's going to be done pretty quickly. Basically that obviously this is such an 80-20 issue where we're on the right side of history that even the Democrats will come together and pass something that makes sense. And here we are a year later. They have had many opportunities to do that. And are not, they're still not, they're still holding up. So, but here we are anyway. This morning, like what I'd like to do first, as kind of like always, is give people an opportunity to get to know who you are, where you come from, and how you've found yourself involved in Maine politics, essentially.
Yeah, great. I mean, I'll give a rambling answer to all of those different points. It's the Leyland Streiff, as you'd said. I'm the leader of the Maine Girl Dads, which is a coalition of 8,000 fathers that really spans the entire political spectrum in Maine, fighting for sex-based rights for our daughters. I'm also the leader and lead applicant for the Protect Girls Sports in Maine ballot initiative that is currently headed to the November ballot. A year ago, I never would have seen myself in politics. I spent, my professional career as an executive at marketing and advertising agencies, doing some pretty cool stuff. The truth is that several years ago, this whole issue had started to, get put on everyone's radar. of sort of, males and female spaces, males and female sports. I think I was probably like a lot of other people where I thought maybe this is just sort of like, the boogeyman in the media, like you read about and you're like, is that really happening? And then there were, things that started cropping up in my kids' schools that I was like, wow, this is like really happening close to home. And then about just over a year ago, I started getting connected in with some of our other parental rights groups in Maine, as it relates to, the parental rights in education initiative, or, Maine Education Initiative, and starting to get to talk to those people and understand sort of the depth and scale of this issue in Maine, and, banded together with a bunch of other dads early last year to petition the MPA to get some sort of a change. Thought maybe that'd sort of be the end of things, given what you had said, Chuck, that, this is 80-20 issue. Figured, it would show up in a big way, say something to the MPA. It was right after a male had just won the girls' state title in the high jump. And not only did that male win the girls' individual state title, but that then gave that team the points that they needed to win the overall team state title by 1 point over the second place team that was the all-female team. So looking at that and just being like, this is like kind of crazy. And to your point, 80-20 issue, even in Maine, 70-30 issue, change has to happen. Let's tell the MPA, 8,000 people petitioned the MPA, and obviously nothing changed. So, it was at the end of the summer. Even then, though, it was sort of like behind the scenes, like my name wasn't out there. And it was really at the end of the summer when we had a chance to push this as a citizens initiative, where I and some other dads and advocates banded together and said, hey, like it's time to, speak up and sort of give a voice to people that are maybe like a little too scared to be able to put their voice out there. And let's do something that can provide real, systemic change across the entire state at once, and know that might put our own sort of reputations on the line to be able to do it, but it's something that was worth it. So we did that. Now I'll pause before we get more into that. The last couple of things about me, maybe more on a personal level, before we get back into sort of the political sides of things, is dad of 3, got 2 boys. I've got a girl. I've an amazing wife who's much more awesome than me. I always say behind every amazing woman is a mediocre man. So that's me. We moved up here a couple of years ago. We fell in love with Maine a very long time ago, came up here a ton, bought a house up here. We're spending time up here. And, post COVID, we didn't have to go into the office anymore. We were living outside New York City. And, we said, why are we living in a suburb of New York? Why don't we live, in the place that we really love and we feel drawn to? So we moved up here a couple of years ago and absolutely love it.
Well, awesome. Well, Maine is beautiful, and it's interesting. There are a lot of Mainers that don't want migration, don't want people moving here from other places. But ultimately, like, I think a big part of that is because we don't want people bringing their politics here. So you're welcome. You're very welcome on behalf of most of Maine. Yeah. It definitely helps. But yeah, no, I think what's interesting is, like, especially in the greater Portland area where I've lived for like the last 7 or 8 years, it's almost more likely that you're going to find somebody who's not from Maine than somebody who is from Maine. Right. And so, when I was first building relationships, I was in a room and I would be like one of the only 1 or 2 native born Mainers. And so Maine is definitely a very interesting place in terms of its migration, both nationally and internationally. But obviously, you're becoming a leader in an important way. And so obviously for that reason, we're very appreciative of the fact that you came here and you have the capacity to help. And, I think this is such it's such an 80-20 issue. It's such an important issue that's focused on protecting like fairness in sports for girls. It's about protecting their spaces as well. And I think that this is just a common sense policy that should have been, and there were plenty of opportunities for the Maine legislature to put this into place. And they chose not to. And so, but like, one of the things that we were talking about before, I think it's worth like trying to get into is like, say, what are the bullet points of exactly what this policy will do? And then what are the what are the things that people are saying that it does? What what's
Yeah. Let's go through it. Yeah. So the proposed bill's super simple. I urge people to go to our website, protectgirlsportsinmaine.com. You can read the entire act. You can also read the Secretary of State's summary right there. And it's really simple. And I actually think that's sort of obviously it's by design, because this should be a simple solution to an issue that has gotten really complicated and shouldn't be. But also, obviously, as we sort of go through the process, from a ballot perspective, I think one of the flaws of things like voter ID is the complexity of what was being asked. I think that proposed bill was like 7 pages long. Ours is literally like half a page. And it does some very, very specific things. The first is the fact that it doesn't even mention the word gender. It defines sex. And it defines sex as your biological status is recorded at birth on your original birth certificate. That definition is aligned to literally every major medical organization on planet Earth, including the American Medical Association, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. It's really indisputable that sex is innate, immutable biological marker that we record at birth on our birth certificate. So that is number one. What is sex? And separating sex from gender. Number two, it designates then school sports participation by sex, male, female, and then importantly, co-ed. And I'd say about that an asterisk, because the media will say, well, how are schools going to have all this money to do something new and create these new categories? Like, no one's creating anything. This is like literally the way that sports have worked for 50 years. If there is not a sex only option for you and you want to play that sport is inherently co-ed. Field hockey has literally been like this forever. Field hockey is primarily a female sport, but if a male wants to play it, they play on the female team. Now, we can argue whether or not that's safe. I think a lot of us probably saw that video like a year or two ago in Massachusetts where some girl got like her teeth knocked out from that. But like, that's how it works. Wrestling is another good example. I wrestled first grade up to college. And, when I did, it was primarily males, very few females, but there were some females, and they would obviously wrestle along with the males. That's grown now. And there's not two completely different sex designated teams for wrestling. There's wrestling, and there are males and females that are wrestling. Football, same thing. There was a, female that played on the football team when I was growing up, and that would happen now. If you're okay, maybe getting hurt and you can make the team, go play football. Like, it doesn't change anything. There are sex designated sports, and when there is not one for your sex, it is inherently co-ed. It's always worked that way. Will continue to work that way. The third thing that the bill does is designate private spaces by sex as well. And private spaces specifically mean not just bathrooms, but also locker rooms and showers. So all private spaces are protected and designated by sex. And then the last thing that it does is, of course, allows a civil recourse if your civil rights are violated, which is amazing that right now, if you do not get a sex only, a single sex space, which a female wants a female only space and doesn't get it, that's a violation of her civil rights. Right now, she can't sue for that. Of course, she should be able to sue for that. So that's all that it allows. It does those four things. It defines sex, designates sports by sex, designates private spaces by sex, and allows for civil recourse if your rights are violated. That's it.
So help me understand, because this is like a little bit mind blowing. I think I first heard about the fact that there's the civil recourse side from which one of the items I want to get to later, which is the Shenna Bellows wording, which she, I was curious what she could possibly do with this, and she did not disappoint. She found a way to make it sound like something completely other than what it is. But within some of the discourse around that, I learned that it was saying that it allows parents to sue. Now, how in the world are you not currently able to sue if your civil rights are being violated?
Because it's the way that I understand it is because it's aligned to a education policy. So the policy of the education in Maine is that you can play and go into spaces based off of your gender identity. So there is nothing to sue about there because it is aligned to the actual policy. And this is sort of inherently the problem here. So there's the Maine Human Rights Act that says you can't discriminate against somebody on a sole basis of their sex, for example. And then that's meant to dovetail together with education policies. Well, right now, we are not abiding by federal Title IX, which says all of those spaces need to be designated by sex. So because of that, we need to pass a law that says that, because we aren't abiding by federal law, so that we now have a state law that dovetails with the Maine Human Rights Act. So until that happens, these laws are not in unison right now. And so someone is not able to sue because technically the schools are all following the policy of the state.
That still hurts my brain. I'm like, but
we're like we are in an absolute upside down world right now. We have completely overcomplicated really simple issues.
Yeah, I would agree. And so what are the counter arguments? Like, what are we hearing? Again, we talked about testimony from yesterday. So what are, what does the left bring to the table? I say the left because even though this is really a nonpartisan issue, right?
Yeah,
like this is.
I would say there's a lot of people on the left that are on our side. To your point, like, I mean, this is. I would say, I would dare to say the majority of Democrats agree with our side on this. This is like people with kids or, people with common sense are on our side about this. So this is, a very common sense issue, which I think is the words you use, which I totally agree. I think there's a few things that we sort of hear as opposition, and we can go through all of them. Number one is that we're banning people. No, everybody has a sex. Literally nobody's banned from anything. You use spaces and sports designated by your sex. Nobody is banned. And the question that we'll sometimes get on that is, well, what about intersex people? Intersex people continue to have the same protections that they've had since 1990 with the American Disabilities Act when that was passed, which is how it works today. So no change there. Nobody is banned from anything. You continue to be able to play sports, continue to be able to use private spaces, simply designated by your sex. So I think that's the biggest thing that we continue to hear, that we are going to be banning somebody. I think the other things that we continue to hear is, if you look at the testimony yesterday, there were a couple of things that they want to keep bringing up. Number one is actually not even arguing based off of the merits of what our bill is. It's saying, well, this is, an out-of-state billionaire funded a lot of the signature gatherings. So these are out-of-state ideas being forced on Maine children. First of all, there's like multiple ways that this is insane. Number one, the things being forced on Maine children right now is sex-based discrimination. Females that want female-only spaces don't get them. Their civil rights are being violated. So that's currently being forced on children right now. And we should be all on the same side of ending discrimination. That's what we want to do. So that's number one. Number two is, oh my God, somebody from out of state agrees with people in Maine that wanted to do something and was willing to help us. We will take help from people in state and out of state that believe that civil rights shouldn't be violated. Of course we would do that. The second is the fact that even bringing up the fact that we had a large donor, are we trying to invalidate the financial support or the time support that hundreds of people from Maine put in, that donated their time and their money to be part of this campaign? What does that mean? What are you trying to say? Are you trying to invalidate all of the time that hundreds of people across the state spent, or all of the money that they donated to be able to help this as well? And the last is, what are you saying? Like, that person paid for signatures? Literally, that money goes to like a person standing outside Hannaford's when it's 7 degrees outside and snowing because we don't have enough volunteers. It's not paying for signatures. So what about the 82,000 people that signed it? What are you saying about them by that? It's an absolutely incredible statement. And the last thing I'd say about it too is ethics filings were due last week. So I can't wait to be able to I haven't had the time to dig into their ethics filing and see where their funding's coming from as well. So,
well, I just think it's such a gaslight of the opposition. They have no problem taking billions and billions of dollars over the years from George Soros. I didn't hear the outcry when George Soros bought Jackie Sartorres to be the district attorney for Cumberland County. Like, literally spent, I think it was $300,000 for a primary. And they didn't care then. They only care because they're trying. They think it's something they can potentially use against and put a black mark on this. But It's absolutely ridiculous.
It up too is also owned by Soros. You look at the Press Herald. Like, I mean, these are all Soros-backed organizations that are out there talking about this and trying to push this on us. So I think it's a really interesting and hypocritical and ironic argument that's trying to be made. And interesting too, like, make the argument. Fine. I don't actually mind having the conversation about it, but why can't you also talk about the merits of the bill? Like,
Right.
And the reason is because your entire argument falls apart. You're either standing for discrimination or you're on our side. There's no other in between on that.
Yeah.
And I think to keep going further, the other thing that we continue to hear is a narrative being pushed that what we are doing is actually saying people need to fit a certain mold. If you're not a boy that looks this way, then you have to be a boy and look a certain way, for example. And what's crazy about this is a couple of things. Number one, the people that are out there saying that stuff are primarily the women's lobby of Maine. So I don't know if you know, the group that has formed a campaign in opposition to us is supposedly two groups that stand for women and girls and for equality and fairness, Equality Maine and the Women's Lobby of Maine, which is incredible and ironic that they don't stand for females anymore and they don't care about stopping discrimination of children. The second is the fact that what they're talking about is incredibly regressive, and they are pushing onto us something that isn't true. Our point of view is the fact that there is no right or wrong way to be male or female. However you want to look, however you want to, feel, present yourself, identify, go for it. Humans are awesome in all of their unique ways. That doesn't mean you're not a male or female. Why wouldn't we take the more progressive stance of there's no right or wrong way to be a male or female? If you want to be a male wearing a dress and long hair in the bathroom, who gives a shit? Like, I don't understand. Actually, they are saying, well, if you don't fit, you need to fit into stereotypes and then use bathrooms based off of those stereotypes. So everyone that kind of looks like a girl should be in the girls' bathroom. Why? Wouldn't it be more progressive to say there's no right or wrong way to look or feel or identify? We're still males or females. Look however you want, identify however you want. Awesome. That's super cool. So they're parroting this regressive idea and trying to push that on us when we have the most progressive stance on this possible. And it's amazing that that's coming from the Women's Lobby of Maine, which held the press conference yesterday before they had the opposing arguments. I mean, the lack of self-awareness and the cannibalization of their entire organization and their point of view. And on the other side of this, when we get through November, I think they're going to have a lot of answering to do as human beings, as parents, and as an organization on why they have tried to demonize young girls that have been standing up for their sex-based rights.
Yeah, I like, again, it's so, this whole conversation is so incomprehensible. I wonder how we ever got to the place where we're having this conversation, why we're still having this conversation. But again, to highlight your point, like you're like what you guys, what this Protect Girl Sports and Spaces initiative is focused on is just about making sure that sex-based rights are not violated, right? And ensuring, it is so interesting that the progressives have become regressive in their thinking, and they're again, in order to be a boy, you have to use a certain bathroom. And like one of the interesting things is, like, are they also arguing that doctors should not perform prostate exams on biological males who identify as female?
And this is like, if you watch the testimony, it's one of the things that I kind of, really press them on, is that if you watch, so I was sort of challenged by Ellie Soto, and I apologize to her if I'm getting her name wrong, her pronunciation of her last name. But even if you look at the challenge and the way that sort of, opposition talks about this, they can't keep sex-based and gender-based terms separate. They continue to be conflated and confused and interchanged, and they're not. So they're definitionally not. They have two different genders. I mean, two different definitions. Gender is a social construct and role we play in the world in an innate sense of, who I am and how I feel. Biology is what sex is. They are two different things, and everybody on the planet defines them that way. But they're also that different scientifically, and they're different legally. Even the Maine Human Rights Act calls out gender identity versus sex as two distinct ideas. So you can't continue conflating both of these things and still somehow make a coherent argument. You need to be able to pull them apart. And I actually think that that's one of the biggest problems that we have across the board. on our side, sometimes people I think are getting them wrong and they're conflating the two. Definitely in the media, saying it every which way. The amount of media that has reported on this bill and called it that people will play sports based off of their gender assigned at birth is insane. I want to like put my head through a wall every time I read that, because all you need to do is read the bill to understand it only says sex. And then all you need to do is go to Google and say, are gender and sex the same thing? And read the definitions that's there from, WPATH or the American Medical Association that tells you right there, they're not the same thing. So we need to like actually be based in science and fact as we're having these conversations. And the world has fallen apart. And when you look at the defense of the opposition, everything they say is conflating these two things together, and they're not pulling them apart, which is required for us to have a real legal or scientific conversation about this stuff.
Yeah, well, I definitely think that there are some forces within our country and our culture that are trying to like further go outside of reality, is what I'll say, and suggest that that you can actually change your sex, which you just can't. Like you're going to be XX and XY.
I don't know how you're doing that.
Right.
It's literally in the cellular level. It's not possible.
Right, exactly. And so that's where this
what's
is
amazing. I'm sorry to cut you off. Is if you rewind to 18 months ago, 2 years ago, everyone would have been saying the opposite. No, we're not talking about sex. We're not talking about changing sex. We're talking about gender. Gender is a social construct. And you're right. No, now we're talking about people are saying, no, you can change your sex. I mean, it's my. I'll give you a funny story. My kids went to a well-known farm camp in the greater Portland area last summer, which you would think biology matters in the farm camp. And somehow, stuff about like gender and all of that sort of stuff came up. And one of my kids said, well, gender, like you can identify however you want. That's cool, but you can't change your sex. And the counselor literally goes, that's not true. You can change your sex. Anything's possible. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, you're not going back to camp enough today. You guys stay at home. Like we're gonna go to the ocean or something. Like if that's the kind of quality that we're getting at the farm camp that's supposed to be teaching everybody about biology, never mind. We can stay home and have fun here. It's like, what are we doing?
Yeah. It's hard to keep up with all the just what's going on in our world. It's just it's kind of one of the things that I can understand how some people buy into like what I'll call crazy conspiracy theories. And one of the reasons is because number one, so many things that we called crazy conspiracy theories 5 years ago, many of them have come true. It turned out to be true, number one. And number two, like some of the things that you would have never thought anybody would ever be arguing, such as the fact that the idea that you could change your sex, are now being talked about as though they're obvious realities, and that anybody denying that they're the ones that are crazy. But anyway, so I want to move on because there are a couple other things that I want to discuss. I want to just there is one last objection actually that I keep hearing, and I feel like it's worth. It's a objection based in emotion, I think, right? And I think it's one that I think it's worth discussing, I guess, and I'd like to hear how your response, because like one of the comments that I keep hearing from people is that people who identify as the other gender, if they're unable to, they have, higher suicidal ideation is the claim. And they, one of the things that helps them is being able to play with a sports team that with the gender that they identify as.
Yeah. I think a couple things about it. One, that's really hard. First of all, like, I mean, I'm a dad. I've got neurodivergent children. I have my own neurodivergent issues. So I don't know if people see me chomping while I'm here. I have Tourette's. Like, I understand sort of, the imperative of mental health and the effect that can have, and especially as a parent looking at a child and thinking, I'm going to do whatever I can to, make them feel comfortable. I get that. Like, I think that makes total sense. I'm not going to get into, I'm not an expert in all of the science where there are, I think, things worth people reading, like the Cass report, for example, out of the UK, or even evidence that's just come out of Finland, a 25-year study that they did for every single person that has gender affirming care. It just came out last week. People can read these things on their own and come to their own conclusions around, the sort of mental health of someone before affirmation and the mental health of somebody, years after affirmation. That's not for me to talk about. I'm not an expert in that space. That being said, right now, this is a hard truth. I mean, hard truths are still truths, no matter what. And I think that the compassionate thing is for everyone to hear the hard truths. And the truth is, the way that the laws are, if a female or a male wants a sex-specific space or sports opportunity, they're owed that by law. They're owed that by federal law and by state law. Anything else is discrimination, regressive, and illegal. And there are no laws that I'm aware of that we do not enforce because we hear that it might affect somebody's mental health. That doesn't exist. So if somebody else can name me the other law that, we take a look at and you say, you know what, actually don't apply it to that person because they're going through some stuff mentally and they feel a certain way and that law shouldn't apply to them. I mean, then maybe I could have my mind changed, but I'm unaware of that. So that's just how law works. And the law is here to be able to create rights that are for the many and for the majority, for our society. And of course, there's stuff that falls through the cracks there where people don't feel represented in that. But that's not like the problem that Leyland's solving. I mean, that is a systemic problem that exists with law. That's how it works. So, I have compassion for people that feel that they don't fit into that and, feel that, their mental health is put on the line based off of, how they need to move through the world. That's really hard. I deal with that with my own kids in different ways as well as with myself. And I can empathize with that. But there's also the reality that laws exist and a law is being broken right now. And it's not up to me to say, you know what, there's asterisks on the law for when it hurts somebody's feelings. And that's the truth.
Well, and I also think that what's interesting is going back to the regressive versus progressive element of the quote unquote progressive party and the ones who are kind of pushing this is that why is it that these children think
100%.
that they need to play with that aligns with their gender identity, not their sex. And I think it's because they're being told that this is the ultimate thing that proves that you actually are what you think you are. And therefore you have to be able to do it. Otherwise it's not true. And so it's actually, in my opinion, the problem is being created by the other side of this argument, not by what we're doing. So
100%. And I sorry, just to add on to that, I think that that's one of my biggest challenges with it, where I just I can't wrap my head around it completely, is wouldn't you want to hug that kid and say, hey, you're going through something. I want you to know you should look and feel however you want and say you are whoever you want. Awesome. You're still you. You are still in your own biology. You can be a male or a female and look and present and feel all of these different ways. How awesome. We're all unique. Someone shouldn't challenge that sort of identity about yourself, but that doesn't mean the reality that you're living in around your biology doesn't exist anymore. Why don't you marry those two things for that person and tell them that they're amazing just the way that they are? No, we're instead telling them, to your point, there's something different. There's something wrong here, and now you're something different, and you need to be in a different category to align to stereotypes that somebody has put on you. No, there's no right or wrong way to be male or female. And I hope those kids feel like that someday, because that would be affirming. That would be a progressive way to go through the world, and for us societally to say, you know what, there's no right or wrong way to be male or female. I wish we all felt like that.
Yeah. Well, and I definitely sympathize with, puberty is not easy and it's very confusing. So I definitely sympathize with anybody who's struggling and with any of that stuff. So, to move on, because there are a couple other things that I want to get you out of here in a timely fashion of some sort. So there's two more items. One is you've got a legal challenge that has arisen, and then I want to talk a little bit about Bellows and her struggles with the English language.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I mean, we can talk about both. Yeah, so there's a legal challenge. There's a legal challenge against the Secretary of State's validation of the petition, where they said, hey, we actually think you missed stuff And there's been, these sort of allegations of, they did things wrong somewhere, and there should be more signatures that were invalidated. I'm not the lawyer. We've got lawyers that have sort of intervened and are helping provide response for the Secretary of State, because obviously that lawsuit's against the Secretary of State, not us, but we are an interested party, and so we are helping sort of respond to a lot of this because we'd have a lot of information. I don't feel, concerning. I'm not the lawyer. I can't go too deep into the specifics of it. What I can say is that as they've widened the aperture of the things that they're alleging, the substance of what they have to say is becoming very quickly non-existent. So we feel very good about what that is. There's still like a couple things to go through. I think our response is due this week, and then courts look at things next week. But in the next couple of weeks, this will all sort of be put to bed. The question sort of, is going to eventually go back to the Secretary of State to then make a determination on, does she reopen her validation or say, hey, there's like nothing here, validation stands. We're not going to look into anything further. So that's, to come over the next couple of weeks, but not really a lot of angst at all on our side about it. This was absolutely expected. I think the only thing that maybe wasn't expected is, to go back to a point I was making earlier, is sort of who's behind all of it. There was a campaign that was created, a campaign for free and fair schools, that is, three groups have come together: GLAD Law, and then Equality Maine, which supposedly stands for equality and standing up for rights of children, which I guess it doesn't. And then the Women's Lobby of Maine, which has forgotten what a girl and a woman actually is as it relates to sex, and it has gone headfirst into only caring about gender identity at this point, which is a completely interesting point of view for them to be taking organizationally. So yeah, not unexpected, not shocking at all. We are very confident all of that's going to be put to bed, and aren't really thinking twice about it, other than just making sure we're responding in the right manner.
Makes sense. That all sounds good. I'm glad to hear that. I was like, I don't know. I don't trust the process here in Maine at this point, and so I'm like, I'm probably a little bit more anxious, just because I don't.
I think it's okay. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. I know other people are anxious because this is such a win for us. We're not anxious, and I don't. I mean, to your point, I'm not even sure that the opposing counsel is 100% aware of Maine law either. So they're you're talking about out-of-state money. They're out-of-state lawyers that are trying to tell us how things are supposed to be done in Maine. And I think that the thing that's actually funny about all of this is that we have all these conversations all the time of like, save democracy. I go downtown and everyone's got all these signs that say like, save democracy. But then we take something that I would argue is maybe the most democratic process we could possibly imagine, of a citizens initiative, bunch of people standing outside over the winter collecting signatures, 82,000 people sign it, and then it's going to be sent to the ballot by a simple majority vote. We don't need to worry about bureaucrats in Augusta and what they're going to do versus what the will of the people is. And now people are like, hold on a second, wait a second, stop right there. We do not want all of Maine to go vote on something. I don't know, like last week we cared about democracy. Do we care about it this week? I do. 82,000 people that signed this thing do.
Yeah, well, the propagandists, there's propaganda everywhere, but yeah, I mean, obviously they use the idea of quote unquote democracy. I mean, in the name of democracy, they wanted to keep Donald Trump off the ballot. This is the same crew that is anti-democratic. Like this is. No,
usually I save democracy sign and then someone standing right next to him that says resist, and I'm like that. Something's at odds there. How do you guys not see those two things are slightly at odds? The guy that was duly elected, even by a majority vote across the United States, you're still like, resist him because we love democracy. I'm like, maybe look at your signs together and have a little conversation. What do those two things mean? Yeah.
It means we want our way at whatever cost.
Exactly.
But so there was, before we get to the last question, there was one other thing that I think we're confident on where things are moving forward is with the ballot initiative question. Like this, there, like it gets essentially gets validated by the Secretary of State, and then the language gets created, an LD number gets created for it, and the legislature actually has the opportunity that they could pass it. themselves and save the trouble of having it, for instance, be able to become on the ballot in November. But as of yesterday, that they've moved past that, right? They've chosen not to do that, and now it's definitely going to be on the ballot in November.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, the way that I understand the process and how things happened yesterday is that when a proposed bill is sent to the legislature, an action must be taken. From what I understand, Democrats were actually trying not to hold a public hearing on this, which is a required action that they must take. And the Republicans, made us think about that and said, we have to. So last Friday evening, basically, it got announced that Tuesday there was going to be a public hearing. We had the public hearing yesterday. And then after that, they could go to work session and then, work through what they were going to do with the bill. The Democrats voted down the party line to not have a work session and just have the bill, quote unquote, die in the legislature, which means they're going to do nothing. And that means that this will now officially go to the November ballot, which fine. Not unexpected. I do think if, I agree still with the testimony that I gave yesterday that they had a chance to do something a bit heroic. Like, I think we all know deep down, like, what the right thing to do here is. And it would have been great if they had done that. I didn't go on to Polymarket and bet the house though, on them passing yesterday. So, expected a bit of a bummer. I think everyone can just, have made the right decision. They didn't though, but hey, that's great. Like, Maine gets to vote on this. I think, having this be a simple majority vote, is awesome. Like, what a great way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is a way for the people of Maine to speak about how they feel on this issue, which gets at the last real issue that I want to talk about, which is the wording of the question. Like I said, Bellows. I was like, people are like, "There's no way she's going to be able to," and I'm like, "There's a way. She's going to find a way to make."
Honestly, and I'm fine admitting I was wrong. I was like, "How could she screw this up?"
Yeah. Like she master class at I actually joke that she has struggles with the English language. She actually knows it really well. And she's able to use it very, very strategically to make, to say something in such a way that it sounds like something other than what it is. And so what is the wording? I don't know if you have it in front of you, or maybe I can find it, or
I could get it really quick. Hold on. I could get it. So
I should have had that ready.
I don't have it. Hold on.
I think I found it. Right here. Okay. It is. Okay. So if AI is correct, we're going to go with. But do you want to change civil rights and education laws to require public schools to restrict access to bathrooms and sports based on the gender of the child's original birth certificate, and allow students to sue the schools?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, hell of a job. Finding the way through that one. I mean, I got to be honest. I was talking before too. I was like, she can't screw it up that bad. She literally wrote the title that we had for the bill, which I love. Like, I couldn't have written a better one. An act to designate school sports participation in facilities by sex. Like, boom, awesome. Just put that on. Put that on there. I mean, like, perfect. So she clearly understood it. And then went in and tried to do her best, obviously, to make it sound like you were, like a discriminatory bigot if you said yes to this thing. I think, like, generally, like, could it have been worse? Probably could have been worse. But there's some stuff in it that is, like, factually wrong. We put out a press release. We're going to assume that, she is going to read all of the comments come in and take a reevaluation of the question. So we're hoping that, the constitutional process that's supposed to be followed of a clear, concise question written in a direct manner happens. I think that there's a couple of things that are sort of our stance on this, which is, number one, the question should be sourced from the legislation itself. The language in the legislation should be the governing body, essentially, of how the question gets written. And if that's the case, which is also sort of the point of view of counsel, there's a couple of things that fundamentally have to change. So first is it's saying gender versus sex. Gender is not defined at birth. Sex is observed at birth. So our bill literally doesn't even say the word gender. It only says sex and defines sex. So there is no way the word gender is going to continue to be in there. And I think that's important. One, because the bill's only about sex, but two, again, this shit is confusing. You're confusing people. When you say gender, you're like, well, wait a second. Is that how someone identifies, or you mean their sex? Let's just say what things mean. We're talking about sex. So we believe that's going to ultimately have to change. The second is the fact that it starts with saying, do you want to change civil rights laws? We're not changing civil rights laws. Education policy is going to change. Civil rights laws won't change. We're enforcing civil rights laws that exist right now. And I think what's interesting about this is that so the way that it works is we give a proposed act. We give the language. That goes to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State writes her own summary of the act that people then read on the petitions that she then prints. Well, ours says in there that this can't be construed as discrimination according to the Maine Human Rights Act. She went a step further in the summary that she wrote. And I think this is really important. In the summary that she writes, she says, quote, the initiated bill does not constitute unlawful discrimination under the Maine Human Rights Act. That was included in our bill. That's not her language. That's ours. This is her language. Quote, and that the Maine Human Rights Act may not be construed to conflict with the provisions of the initiated bill. Okay. So she's saying that the initiated bill, when enacted, is in no way at odds with the Maine Human Rights Act. So, I mean, you literally wrote right there, we're not changing civil rights laws. We're actually upholding laws that exist right now. It's not at odds. So we believe that's going to ultimately change as well. The two other changes that we've sort of flagged there are, number one, she only calls out bathrooms. It's important to talk about more than that. You know, safe spaces and private spaces include locker rooms and showers. So the importance of the full scope of that matters. And then the last is the sue the schools piece. Yes, they should be able to sue the schools. It's okay if that's left in there. I do think she picked a little bit of like a flippant way of talking about civil recourse for a violation of your civil rights. But I mean, that's a style choice, I guess, at that point. So, you know, those are probably our three things in priority order. And again, you know, optimistic that the secretary will hear public comment, but also understand sort of the legal basis of the fact that there's a couple things in there that fundamentally need to change because they directly contradict the language in the bill itself and the act as she wrote the summary on a petition that 82,000 people signed. I don't know how those could possibly not change.
So, but here's the question, like, who is overseeing this potential change?
Yeah, so the way that
just Shenna Bellows?
It is, yes, I believe. Yeah, her office. Yes, Office of the Secretary of State. So yeah, all the public comments will roll in between now and May 7th. She will take a look at that and then, you know, ideally, hopefully, provide a revised question. And obviously, if that revised question doesn't do what it needs to do, there's, you know, legal recourse can be pursued if that's the case. So, you know, our hope and
so we have
not go there.
There would be legal recourse because I just have zero.
There can be. That's when there would be. And from what I understand, it was one of the sort of the flaws around voter ID is that when that question came out and they said, hey, this question sucks and it doesn't represent what we're saying. They just went directly to suing and pursuing legal action. And then there was no public comment that gave like a basis to say, hey, like 5,000 other people agree with your point of view. There's no public comments to say that. So we believe that the public comment actually really matters. So we've put out our own point of view. We've made our own public comment. I made public comment. Everybody should make public comment. Yeah. And then we will see on the other side of that, you know, is the Secretary of State done her duty? Because her duty is really clear according to the Constitution. And if not, yeah, that would traditionally be the place where you say, like, you know what, like maybe we should get a court involved then because this seems off. You know, our hope would be that we don't get to that point.
Let's hope, and I'm hopeful, but it is within the realm of possibility that because the courts in the state of Maine are controlled by the same party. Shenna Bellows is running for governor, and all of this is part of her attempt to win a Democrat primary. I think it's not legal to use your position in order to campaign, but she'll just say that that's not what she's doing.
Right.
But I hope that you're right and the language changes. But regardless, I think I hope that we get enough word out there, and I think that people are with us. And I still don't think the wording is bad enough that we don't win on it if it doesn't change. But hopefully, we're able to get that changed.
Agree. I think people understand this issue. People of all sides of the political spectrum were seeking out this petition over the winter. And this is the thing that's even crazy about it. To your point of like saying, for Shenna Bellows, she's looking at this as like a way that she can, campaign. If that's true, like you're out of touch with reality if that's the case, because the majority of people have moved on from this. And there's this growing discrepancy between what Democrat voters actually think versus what elected Democrat officials continue to say. And I hope that shows up here in November. It's wild because the majority of people aren't believing in these extreme positions that the elected officials keep voting on.
Yeah.
Like the majority of the state agrees with us. You should have just passed this thing yesterday and just been like done with it and like move on to the next thing. This isn't 2024. Like people are in a very different place on this issue, and everyone is willing to say enough's enough. Like sex-based rights really matter. Like we can include everybody without discriminating against sex anymore. Like, can we move on? But from an elected official standpoint, the Democrats refuse to do that. Eventually it's going to catch up with them because their voting base doesn't agree with them anymore.
Let's hope. I actually feel bad for Democrat voters at this point because I think to your point, like they do not represent even their base. They have gone off the rails on like all the 80-20 issues. This is just one of the examples.
Look at the options you got now. We're talking about Plattner and Mills and Bellows and you're talking about pretty extreme positions.
Yeah.
When you've got a voter base that isn't as extreme as you are.
Yep. So I think they hope that they can just stoke enough fear of Trump and the Republicans that they don't have to actually get better. They don't actually have to represent their own voters, but we'll see what happens. Well, thank you so much for the work that you're doing on this and for just being trying to what's my words are not coming to me. Yeah, just thank you for the work that you're doing, for the willing to come on and talk in detail about this whole process. Hopefully it will come November. We'll have a huge win to celebrate. Hopefully, from my perspective, I hope we get a couple more wins as well. But at the very least, we'll hope to be able to celebrate this. Hopefully, before this comes up, we'll also hear that the language has changed to be something more reasonable. But I have a little faith in that Bellows lady. So.
I'm going to keep the faith. Until it's completely been exhausted by the end of the summer. But for now, I'm going to maintain some level of confidence that she's going to do the right thing. So we'll see what happens.
All right.
But I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on. It's awesome, and I really appreciate you spreading the word.
Yeah, anything I can do to help. All right. Thank you all for watching. We'll be back here. I don't think there's anything else this week. So next week, we'll see you.
Amazing.
All right.